wow, not every store was hitting 4,000 members in 6 months. And why weren't we? And how do you dissect your lead funnel to identify where there's gaps in book, show, and close? And that's when you start to learn that frequency of visit in HVLP, in premium, in a boutique fitness is the biggest driver of revenue growth. Like no member that doesn't show up is helping you grow your revenue. And so how do you get smart and look through the funnel and evaluate where your systems and your people and the action that you're taking are getting Matt to show up tomorrow? And so just 6 areas of the business that I think every owner operator should invest in, should evaluate, and maintain and really make changes with as your business scales throughout. And I think that's true for a brand with 7,000 locations. The challenges from an ERP system or CRM system or member management system are much more robust there at that scale than they are for someone who owns a handful of stores. But on the flip side, when you make that membership management decision for your first store, is it going to scale with you to your second, your 10th? What other things are included in it, or what else are you going to have to buy and invest in it? So that's...
We're live. Welcome to this week's episode of Lifts. I'm Matthew Januszek, and I'm here with my co-host, Mohammed Iqbal, bringing you some of the latest news stories from across the health and fitness industry. I just wanted to start. I was reading this book called Inner Excellence, which I've not been reading for a while, but I got back into reading, and it was very relevant to the conversation because as I was doing some research on JJ. The book essentially talks about high performance being too focused on outcomes, and whether that's winning in terms of sport, making money, or specific results, but not enough on the process of who they're becoming to get to that end goal. And there was an interesting example where within the book it said, how do you take a lollipop from a kid who loves lollipops without any resistance? So Mo, as I know you're a successful father, how do you answer that one?
I don't think I'm a successful father. I'm still working on it. And sometimes I'm looking at you, and you've certainly raised your kids right. That's a really good one. So how do you take a lollipop away from a kid? I mean, I don't give them one. That's really it to begin with. I just don't give it to them. And I think if you remove access, especially as you're developing, understanding what your behavior should be, understanding, it's not about right and wrong, because even a child knows the difference between right and wrong. It's about what it's want versus need, and also self-control and will. And I think a lot of that and controlling desire is something that is a learned trait that also develops in early years. So I don't know, as a father, I would say is the best way to avoid a kid from having a lollipop is not to have one around. Does that work?
JJ, do you have kids?
I have 10-year-old twins, a boy and a girl. Yes. And so my answer is give them an alternative. Give them something else, right? It's a trade, whether it's beforehand, right? Maybe you don't want to ever give your kids a lollipop, but you're giving them something, and therefore you want to take that something away. So what's the alternative path? Maybe it's something that you deem has less sugar in it. Maybe it's money, like whatever it is. You need to motivate them with an alternative.
Yeah. Well, I think that Mo went very deep onto that particular question, which I didn't expect. But yeah, but the suggestion in the book was basically to give them a bigger lollipop, which can change their perception. And I think it's, when it related to this conversation, it's that, are we in an industry very focused on short-term outcomes in terms of how we run our businesses and how we serve clients, or are we building the systems that produce more long-term change and adherence? And so I thought, as certainly as I researched you, JJ, I thought that was a relevant way to start this conversation. I'm going to hand over to my co-host now, Mohammed, to see if he can put his own perspective and introduction to what we're going to talk about today.
Well, look, I think we're in a really interesting time in our industry, and I'm going to introduce our host, or our guest rather, JJ, here shortly. But there's a lot that we're thinking about at this time of year. So we're approximately in about early Q2 right now. I think the industry wrapped up a really strong Q1. The top line headlines of everything that we're seeing is really strong. The U.S. fitness industry crossed $34 billion in annual revenue. Global Health Club membership is sitting north of 184 million people. So everything seems like it's really good. And you have different tiers. On one hand, you've got the value tier with Planet Fitness and the Basic Fits of Europe that are doing really well and are seemingly scaling. But Planet Fitness, from a public market perspective, is not having a great year. On the other hand, you've also got the premium tier pulling away, brands like Lifetime and Equinox, who are doing really well. But what seemingly is getting squeezed is really the middle. And the middle, depending on who you speak with, is in trouble. But we know a lot of our friends actually operate in that middle tier. So clubs price between $30 to $70. And recently, JJ, we had Mark Mastrov on, who I think is really looking to play up in that middle tier with his re-entry into 24-hour fitness. So that's what we're trying to figure out, but it's also a very crucial part of the market. And that's the industry, JJ, that we're going to be talking through today, which is this barbell market with the disappearing middle. But let's talk about kind of what's happening right now. I talked a bit about Planet Fitness and what's happening there, and a brand in boutique fitness, which is seemingly shedding brands every month, is exponential. And that's been a topic of recent conversations as well. And obviously, we touched on Mark Mastrov. So to help us unpack a lot of this, I'm excited to introduce someone who I've known for, I think, a few years now, JJ. You've been around the event circuit as all of us have. You've done an excellent job coming out of Orangetheory Fitness and then Purpose Brands as well. And now you've launched into your own consulting firm. So I'm really excited to have you on Lifts.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And your background, I started my career with Planet when there were less than 30 units in the US. And before the brand even rolled out the $10 per month model, and was an early operator in the HVLP space. Part of the founding team at UFIT, where during my time we grew to being the third largest HVLP chain in the US with about 130 owned and operated stores. And then I did just wrap up 6 years with Orangetheory, now Purpose Brands, and most recently the COO of that business. And post-merger, I saw an opportunity to help emerging wellness brands, a lot of them in boutique fitness, and build kind of what we're talking about, the robustness and removing fragility from their operations that normally a brand doesn't get to until they have 100, or a franchisor doesn't get to, they have 500 stores. And so with technology, systems, and all the education and tools that exist out there, how can an early stage brand with 10, 20 stores kind of cement their path forward and make sure their operations and systems match the quality of the workout or their experience that they're delivering for members?
Well, JJ, you do a great job at promoting some of your ideas and experience on different platforms, social media, and I'd certainly recommend anyone start to follow you, particularly if you're in the industry. But one of the things that you've been talking about is the idea that most operators are still running on what you call founder energy, and the person who built the business is still the operating system. So when you look at something like Purpose Brands or the Purpose Brand merger, 7,000 plus locations, two very different cultures, it seems like the problem is now sort of structural and not personal. So when I when I was sort of reading into you, you talk about something called Scream. So give me a real operator story where having something like that in place has saved the business or addressed some of these challenges that you're referring to.
Yeah, I think it's simple. I think if you're the innovator or the operator or the founder of a brand, obviously you're creating in fitness, you're creating either the environment and the experience. If it's boutique fitness, you're creating the workout. And then you're relying on your team to execute and bring it to life every single day. And so SCREAM is an acronym that I use to break down the way that I look at a business and its operations and its strength. And so the S stands for systems, and that's everything from your member management to your CRM system, your texting, SMS, how you're communicating with members or even your staff. Culture is the accountability, the standards, what's happening inside your business within your people. And a lot of that includes your values. Then relationships, and how do you develop your team members, or how do you connect and really engage with your consumers? I think a lot of franchise brands have franchise advisory councils, but very few have member advisory councils, and very few are taking great feedback from their members as they evolve. The E in SCREAM for me is execution, and that's We had 5 opportunities to sell a membership yesterday, but we only sold 2. Why? What are the opportunities? What are the gap there? And A is for action, the speed at which we can pivot. And this, in today's world with technology and so many tools and resources, if you miss out on today, you miss that opportunity forever. And if you miss out on a Q1 of the business, normally you miss out on the year. And then management is just how you as a founder or an operator are creating the tools to manage your team and have visibility into your business. And so just 6 areas of the business that I think every owner operator should invest in, should evaluate, and maintain and really make changes with as your business scales throughout. And I think that's true for a brand with 7,000 locations. What the challenges from an ERP system or CRM system or member management system are much more robust there at that scale than they are for someone who owns a handful of stores. But on the flip side, when you make that membership management decision for your first store, is it going to scale with you to your second, your 10th? What other things are included in it, or what else are you going to have to buy and invest in it? So that's how I think about it. And it really breaks down, it goes further into the skill versus will that you would use to manage your team. It evolves into kind of the entire ecosystem of your business.
I just got a quick follow-up question on that one. For many, certainly a lot of businesses, they don't always start with the ambition or the belief that they're going to get to 7,000 locations. Like you've probably been in many startups like Planet Fitness and Orangetheory that probably didn't start understanding where they're going. Do you think that strategy is specifically related to companies that have that ambition where they're going to go on and get sold or have private equity invested in them? Or do you think if there's someone that just is really passionate about, maybe has a spin studio and wants to open a few locations around somewhere like New York and just really loves it and sees that being part of their life and what they want to do, and until they can't jump on a spin bike again, what do you see about those sort of 2 different models? Because fitness industry is definitely an industry where people are in it because they want to help people. They're very passionate about the product that they're going to deliver, and it becomes almost like a lifestyle to them. So what are your thoughts on that, JJ?
My team and I, and so we do 2 different things. I mean, I serve as a fractional executive, CEO, COO, or strategic advisor to emerging wellness brands. And we also coach small operators that are franchisees from 1 to 10 units. And we use the same framework for both. And so we work with an independent chain in the LA area. And we're using, okay, what's your relationship like with ClassPass? And they're using an outsourced sales team to do that. That's part of systems, right? And how is that working for them to operate their 4 stores? What does your weekly agenda look like for your team and your management? That's part of management. So in my mind, I think this does scale from a 1 unit, 4 unit, 100, 500 unit operator, because it's what I've used since I opened my first gym that I owned and operated in 2010. So I think it does scale. I think the scope, the investment, the amount of people touching these systems are much larger at bigger brands. But an individual franchisee of, let's just call it Exponential Fitness, okay, they can't make a decision on their member management system. They can't make a decision on their CRM system necessarily, but they can choose which HR software they're using or what technology they're bringing in to support their accounting. And they can 100% manage their relationships, their culture, the execution, the action, and the management that their team is taking.
Is there a real operator story, JJ? You worked across so many different brands and so many different business owners, but is there someone who you could talk about, whether you want to name them or not, but who thought that they had everything in place, thought that they're ready to scale, but then they found out that they actually did not? What did that moment look like?
I think any business owner that celebrates hitting a goal, and so I just hit $50,000 in revenue or $100,000 in revenue and celebrates that win and that milestone. And I think that's true. We're all working towards a growth. And so with my time at UFit, I was part of that team from concept to private equity raise and to the peak of that business. And I'll tell you, the first 10 stores were proof of concept. We're like, can we hit the membership numbers that we wanted? Right? It was really just a hustle and a grind to get each store to 4,000, 5,000 members. Okay. Now we're going to do this. Can we do this in different geographies was the second phase of the business. It was really when we went from our backyard of Florida to different states that for me, digging into this framework and building more robustness became real because, wow, not every store was hitting 4,000 members in 6 months. And why weren't we? And how do you dissect your lead funnel to identify where there's gaps in book, show, and close? And that's when you start to learn that frequency of visit in HVLP, in premium, and in boutique fitness is the biggest driver of revenue growth. Like no member that doesn't show up is helping you grow your revenue. And so how do you get smart and look through the funnel and evaluate where your systems and your people and the action that you're taking are getting Matt to show up tomorrow? And so in HVLP, I learned very early on that if a member didn't show up 9 or 10 times in their first 60 days, they were going to cancel by month 3. In boutique fitness, it's relatively the same, just a much shorter timeline. And that's even exaggerated more at the premium markets end of the market.
And you've now talked about 3 brands where I think you helped them get to their peak, meaning Planet Fitness, YouFit, and also Purpose Brands. At the same time, you've also seen them kind of plateau and in some cases decline. Planet Fitness appears on paper, by all accounts, to be growing. They are an ABC Fitness customer as well, so I've got visibility into that. But at the same time, same store membership is actually declining. So that's really interesting. So when you think about, which could also be a good thing because that frequency number is going up. So they need to almost pull back on total store memberships and open up more stores, which they've been doing. Then you talked about YouFit, and you were with YouFit really through its peak, that PE sponsor, and then opening up locations going out of Florida, as you mentioned, and then Purpose Brands, where is probably the largest operation you were a part of, but in some cases they've also flattened and they're looking for ways to grow. How do you know from all of your experience with those 3 mega brands? How do you know when you're peaking?
Yeah, I think, look, in franchising versus company owned, it's a unique battle because in franchising, you're selling licenses based off of the momentum that's behind your brand and you're forecasting that this is going to continue. And as we all know in this industry, it doesn't take 3 months to open a new fitness facility. Sometimes it takes over a year depending on real estate availability. And so you don't know what's around the corner. And so I think for a lot of boutique fitness and independent owners and operators, the 2020 through 2023 period really shifted things. And that's when the rise of Pilates and really yoga started to peak and consumer trends with GLP-1. And so I think for mature franchise brand, it's tough when you have a ton of momentum behind your brand and a ton of interest in selling. You have to be really diligent with your white space and the responsibility of it. And you also have to build in boutique fitness a brand that is agile. And I very much believe, my time at Purpose Brands was focused on Orangetheory. Love the workout. I almost took class this morning. I just slept in a little bit. And so I missed my 5:30 a.m. And they're doing a lot of innovation on their workout to meet the strength training trend and work that was started when I was there. And they're continuing that. And I think hybrid boutique fitness brands that mix cardio and strength really have an opportunity to evolve over time. But with franchising, you had 100 people buy licenses last year and their pipelines and that does impact the business. I think when you are company owned and operated, the way that I think about it is how can I constantly be, chasing down the one tweak of the dial, right? What's the one KPI I can turn a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left to optimize it? And eventually at some stage, it's going to be a cost number. How much is it going to cost me through my tech stack and processing or HR? And you can look at all those things and find money there. It may be something in your sales funnel. It may be something in consumer outreach. Or it may be adding a second modality to it. But I think this business has always been dynamic. I mean, Pilates is on fire right now, and it's been on fire in the past. Will it be on fire forever? Probably not. Just like every other modality has, seen its peaks and valleys. But great operators, whether they have a big brand name behind them or not, still thrive. I mean, think about Gainesville Health and Fitness. Or I live in South Florida. There's an independent boutique studio in Delray Beach, Florida called Slash Fitness, which has been there for 10 years. I have no idea what their financials are. I've never worked with them. But if they weren't successful year after year, they would not still be there. And it's because they have a great experience, great following. They invest in their team. They invest in the workout. They adjust. They lean into social media. And they bring in great tools, which I think is really important in today's age with AI and technology. Like, how can I simplify what, honestly, you probably suck at because you opened a gym? And how can you focus on the things that really deliver those moments of magic to your customers?
This week's episode of the Lifts podcast is brought to you by eGym. eGym is building the future of smart fitness. Their connected ecosystem combines intelligent equipment, AI-powered software, and the WellPass corporate wellness platform to help operators grow their business and deliver measurable health outcomes to exercisers of all shapes and sizes. From powering gym floors to supporting employee wellness, eGym is redefining the workout one rep at a time. Learn more at egym.com.
What do you do, JJ, when it requires more than just a fine twisting of the dials a little bit? Because there are some businesses where I guess you get into them and they've probably left some of those changes too late. Like I've another one of your posts where you talk about the death of the transformation challenge, where you wrote something that stuck with me, which is the biggest loser ran for 17 seasons and essentially trained an entire industry to run Q1 weight loss challenges on autopilot. And your words were, at this point, it's not a strategy, it's muscle memory. And the consumer of those challenges were built for limited data, one goal, to lose weight fast. And that person now has a wearable, a telehealth account, and probably a GL1 prescription. So where you've had these things that have been around for a while, and many businesses just almost like rely upon that and they take a back seat. What do you do when you have to come in and you have to do more than just a little bit of a tweak?
I mean, that's where, when I think about earlier, when I talked about relationships and, staying in touch with your customers. I mean, for example, consumers have been talking about both male and female strength training for years. How many fitness facilities are testing strength? Right?
Very few.
Yeah, very few. I mean, take 18-year-old version of me. I was testing my strength every Monday on National Chest Day inside the gym and writing down what my max bench press when I was in my teens and 20s. But can you create these simple moments to allow the customer to connect the dots between, what your wearable's telling you, what your goals are. And so many, fitness consumers aren't focused on weight loss anymore. It's still a big part of what our country needs, but there's a new solution for it, right? The new solution is in the form of a medication and it's supported by fitness. But the younger demographic is craving strength training. They don't all know how to do it. So how can we create these moments where once a month, once a quarter, there's a brand, Alpha Fit Club, that does a peak week every 13 week and measures strength improvements in their progressive programming, which is really smart. And it creates an opportunity for customers to see their improvement. Orangetheory obviously does benchmarks throughout, but a lot of them historically are cardio based. 1 mile run for distance, 2,000 meter row, my personal favorite 200 meter row because I'm done in less than 30 seconds. But how can you evolve this to being a more strength based as consumers are looking into it? And if you think about it too, go back to, in the US, your presidential fitness test. I mean, as the fitness population ages, mobility, flexibility are going to be extremely important. There's a small tailwind with these things starting to gain traction in the industry. Are we helping customers test that and measure that? And not just to sell personal training, which is normally when you would see this, but how do you bring it into part of the experience to engage your customer and add value? Now, I don't know if you're going to have a stretching challenge inside your facility in the way that you're going to have a weight loss challenge, but you can definitely do strength-based challenges. You can do adherence and frequency-based challenges. You can bring in, have customers do different things where they're, impacting their workouts based off of their sleep and recovery to tie this full ecosystem into the facility.
JJ, you said so much there to unpack. So first, let me start. The Presidential Fitness Challenge. So I'm an immigrant. I came to the U.S. in 1991 and moved to New Jersey. And it actually is what set me on my entire fitness journey, believe it or not. I know Matthew's heard this before, but I don't think we've had a chance to speak about this. But freshman year, a part of that was to run a mile, right? As one of the tests. And then you do the sit-ups and the pull-ups and all that. Well, in the mile in Bergenfield High School in New Jersey, I was last, not just with the boys, but with the girls too. And it was, definitely embarrassing, but it was definitely a moment to be like, wow, like I came in last. But by senior year, so I took that upon a goal. I bought a book in 1993 called, published in 93 by Michael Hogan, called Optimum Sports Nutrition. I picked up running, and by my senior year, I set the mile record at the high school, of 4:32, and I continued to run. Now people know me to run, but that is what was the impetus to have that movement come within me, and a lot of children miss out on that. But I want to go back to some other things you said, which is the assessment. So we're seeing brands start to do that. You mentioned Orangetheory, but also there's a brand that I came across called Revel Fitness out of Australia. I'm sure you've heard of them. And every 3 months, they work on a progression, a program. They do an assessment after 3 months, and then off you go to the next program. And I feel like that progression is really, really important. The other one I want to talk about is the growth of High Rocks. And in a lot of ways, High Rocks fulfill the very thing that you're talking about, which is a way to measure yourself. And I'm convinced that a big reason why people continue to do High Rocks a couple of times a year is because it's that moment where they could dissect and say, how are my splits? How was my row? How was my sled push? And they could break that down, go back, train, come back and do it over again and see how they compare. And then the third thing I would say is, to your point around flexibility and assessments, you've seen technology come in. For example, eGym's Wellness Hub, Technogym has something similar, and other brands coming out with it as well. But clubs now have, and I would even argue phones have some technology within it as well. So clubs are now having tools that they could put in the club that is just beyond an in-body scanner, right? Beyond that, now you could really be testing for things like VO2 max, strength, and flexibility. So the tools are here, but it's up to the club to learn how to use them. And then also, I think, create the awareness with the member base to participate in them. But when you have both of those things together, we've seen a marked improvement in retention for clubs that are able to pull it in.
Yeah, I think first when I did the mile run, I actually had straws. We were supposed to, throw away a straw in a basket every time. I definitely threw a couple straws down the drain because I'd hate running. My best miles, I just did a 50K with buddies, and I mostly walked it, but my mile's like 9:14. So I hate running still to this day. I'm a power walker for life. But I think it's exactly true. I think, look, the High Rocks, I just had a friend who did it in, she was in one of the older age brackets there, and she got second place because there only, as her joke was, there were only a few people in her age bracket that did it.
But it's competitive.
Right?
Yeah.
And she showed up and wanted to challenge herself, her and her team member. And I have tons of friends that do it and see it. And it's because people are looking, and not everyone, but a large portion of people that are participating in fitness are being told that, okay, I'm not going to drink alcohol so I can sleep better. And I'm not going to drink alcohol so I can sleep better because I want to perform better. And how do I measure what that performance is? And someone has to create the opportunity for it. And that's what the wellness industry, our opportunity is. And so High Rocks has definitely filled that gap for a portion of people that love that competition. And obviously you can see the momentum happening with more of these competitions coming out. And I think maybe the pendulum will swing too far and High Rocks is extreme for some. But what's the different moments that you can bring into your facility to connect the dots? I think what the group in Australia that you mentioned is doing, as well as what Alpha Fit Clubs is doing in the Northeast, extremely smart, right? You want to create a program that has themes to it, that is goal-based, that allows me to measure my outcomes. But those measurements can come, to your comment, Mo, off the scale as well, right? And so I think it's a great opportunity for the industry to bring, to honestly penetrate all of our activities because everyone is looking for that.
JJ, you've argued that sometimes 20 years plus experience can become a bit of a ceiling. And I guess if you've been in a space for a certain amount of time, you've developed a playbook, you've been through some successes and losses where you kind of feel confident in your own decision making. And you, I guess in some respects, you can assume that you can predict the future, whereas other people that are coming in, it's like, well, what do they know? But in many cases, it can put you in a position of weakness. You're someone that's lived on both sides of that. And I was just curious to know, where did you personally see your own constraint, and what were some of the warning signs that you recognized before it became a crisis?
I mean, I think, look, we all have our, whether they're natural or developed, our gifts and our strengths. So I think first is I know what I'm not good at, and I continue to try to surround myself with people that are smart there. But I think it's the delta between confidence and ego. And I'm confident that these things will work. But the things that I'm going to be confident about are how you manage your team, how you measure progress, not and how we should communicate with our customers and what the programming should be. I'm confident in creating the structure and the discipline that creates the room for creativity and innovation to exist. One of my partners at Orangetheory is a gentleman named Devin LeBron, and he started a breathwork company called Global Breathwork. And he is one of the most innovative minds out there. And so for me, it's always been partnering with someone, and there's no one that I prefer to work on a deal with or a concept with than Devin, because I start very linear in a linear fashion. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Devin, working in the world of innovation, starts, 10,000 feet in the sky. And he's like, imagine if all these things were, automated and people were going down this path. And together we can come to the middle and challenge both on what's possible and what's feasible. And so I think for me, you have to be a constant student. What I love about what I'm doing now is I get to talk to multiple different brands that are doing things in unique ways, and then bringing tried and true practices and really the lessons that I've learned by making the mistakes at store 20 or store 100 or coming into a brand after it had 1,000 stores and what I wish they would have done 5 years prior. And so for me, it's just constantly learning and finding the partners that can fill your gaps and challenge you.
JJ, and that there's so many parallels there I can relate to running an agency. I've run Sweatworks now for 14 years. We had 14 years last week, and worked with over 100 brands in that time, mostly in product and digital. So it's a very different lane from what you're swimming in. But you're so right. When you see something so many times over and over again, you're like, I've seen that. You want to go further in this direction, or you want to go the other way. One of the hardest challenges which I've found is when you're dealing with founders or talking to board is how do you explain that to them, right? How do you come to them and say, look, I think two things. Number one, everyone thinks that their problem is so unique to their brand, when really you've seen it 100 times, like literally 100 times before. And the second one is they're so convicted in their strategy, and you're seeing them run down the wrong door and the wrong path. How do you convince them to say that, number one, your problem is not as unique as you might think it is, whether it is related to modality, market, pricing, you name it. We've all seen that. And second, how do you kind of navigate them towards the path that you believe is going to point them towards the highest success rate?
Yeah, I think in fitness, it's such a passion-driven industry. And the truth is many operators can will their business to success. I mean, they just can. Their energy is contagious. Their workouts are great. The environments, the lighting, whatever, that's great. But for me, it's about painting the picture through data. And a lot of that can come through a forecast and a model. Like, okay, if we take our experience here at this one store and we multiply it by 10, what does that look like? And, what are the levers that we could pull to maximize system sales or profitability? And if you can get someone to separate from where they are today and to identify where they want to end up and paint that picture, whether it be store 5 or store 100, what are the things that are going to remove fragility from that? Is where I start. And I think the other is, for me personally, where I had to learn is because during my career, I find the balance between ego and confidence. Is I used to walk into a room and talk to people, employees, partners, board members, and I wanted to tell them what I saw, and I wanted to tell them what I thought, and I wanted to them say, yes, go get it. And that worked for a certain period of time. But storytelling is really powerful, and storytelling through data and interviewing customers and interviewing employees. One of the favorite questions I ask when I visit a location, particularly if I'm representing them or I'm executive of that brand, is go to Matthew at the front line and say, okay, hey, Matt, what's the last thing we did that you loved? Okay. Love it. That's great. So glad that resonates with you. Okay, Matt, what's the last thing that we did that made you roll your eyes? Because a lot of the times what we think is important in the ivory tower does not connect with the front line. And you said earlier, Mo, we can bring these technologies and the systems and present them to customers. But the real customer is the employee that needs to drive adoption to it. And so for me, a lot of the times is we all kind of have an idea what a great customer experience looks like. And when we create a workout or an experience, we know what we want Mrs. Jones to experience as the buyer of it. But we miss the friction that our team has to interact with and experience as they try to bring it to life. So for me, it's connecting the dots between the customers, the employees, and the boardroom, and with data.
I think that's brilliant. I've got one last question, and then we'd like to move to takeaways. I'm leaving on a flight tonight to go see our good friend Jeff Zwiefel at 10X Health tomorrow in Scottsdale. And you've talked about this a lot. I've talked about this a lot as well, and certainly been a topic on the podcast, that our competitor really is not that other Pilates studio down the street, but it's really the concierge or the wellness clinic that's opening up around the block. Because ultimately, they're controlling the journey. They're going to be more trusted than your GP. So what we've seen is we recently at HFA had Adam Sedlak on. We've had Mark Mastrov on. And a lot of the customers, which I'm going to, are talking about embedding. Club Studio is another one where they've embedded clinics inside of gyms and starting to dip their toes into IV drips and nutrition coaching, and some even peptides and GLPs. Just curious to get your thoughts in terms of, do you think our industry in fitness has the permission to play in the wellness category, or do we kind of leave that to the wellness clinics?
I think there's a couple different versions. I think first is know what you can be good at and what you're going to deliver really well, because a mediocre experience is never going to help you win. So if it's just a great workout, then just be the great workout. If it's just a great gym, just be a great gym. But I think what you do need to do, if that is you need to educate your team to have meaningful conversations or content on it. You don't need to have every trainer or front desk employee be able to speak about HRT or women's hormone health, but maybe you host a webinar once a month and you bring in an expert to talk about it, to fill that gap for your customers. Because depending on where you play in the premium versus entry level, some markets demand it, definitely higher end facilities demand these conversations today, but it will continue down to the value-based gyms in the coming future. So make sure your team can speak to it. And if you do want to dabble in it, just partner with 10XL, call Jeff Zwiefel and see what Club Studio is doing, because they're not building that muscle in house. They're partnering with someone outside to bring that in as a convenience factor, in the same way that many years ago we were talking about smoothie bars inside gyms, or used to let a massage therapist come in. And so I think at minimum, make sure your team is capable of having a smart conversation on it. At the other end of the spectrum, how can you bring in a partner and grow your businesses together?
JJ, at the end of the episode, we normally give a quick overview of some takeaways that are relevant to share. I was just curious to know from your perspective, you get to meet a lot of businesses. You're a very hands-on practitioner, probably get to see a lot more than most people who are stuck into their own business. What would you say does the industry want to hear, know, or focus on at the moment based on what you're seeing in your world?
I mean, I think the biggest opportunity I see is driving frequency of visit. I think that hands down is the number one thing that's going to exist and is going to create opportunities for business to grow. And, when I started in the industry 25 years ago, you had three buckets. You had members, you had seasonal users, and you had joiners. And I think in today's world, as the younger demographic is showing up more, people are living longer, health and wellness is more top of mind. Driving frequency to maintain your membership and grow your revenue is the number one thing that you should be focused on. And in my world, when I get a peek under the hood at KPIs, very rarely am I looking at a frequency KPI. I'm always seeing a utilization KPI for boutique fitness. What percentage of my treadmills are full or spots in a class, but very rarely am I seeing, is Matthew coming 3 times a week and he's paying to come 4, right? Like, that is the number one thing that I think the industry needs to see. And I think when you get into even big box gyms or HVLP, being able to look at the customers that are seeing a decline in their frequency will even tell you your future churn. And so I would be really dialed in on that, because it's going to be harder in the world of digital marketing to continue to acquire leads and grow. You need to acquire your customers and maintain that relationship with them.
Yeah, I cannot agree more with that. I would just even go a step further and say that it's frequency, but it's also tracking outcomes. And you teased a little bit about that, saying you've got to get more invested in the member's journey. You have to get more invested in their health. And too often, we're tracking everything in aggregation. We're tracking total number of check-ins, total number of visits, total number of members. And really, you've got to get one level deeper, maybe two levels deeper, to get into that member-specific journey if you want to really have an impact on attrition, retention, and engagement. And I think finally, too, it's not just the physical, but also the digital as well. Are they actually living within your ecosystem? Are they actually opening up your app to engage with you there? This has been incredibly insightful and helpful. Matthew, I'm sure you've had a ton of notes, but any key takeaways from this episode?
Yeah, a lot of notes. And JJ, thank you very much. It's been a great conversation. There's love to at some point go a little bit deeper in your playbook. But the one thing that I guess I take away as a business owner and founder, as many people are in the fitness industry, is really, I think you can underestimate how far you can get from that founder passion. I can't remember exactly the terminology you called it, but you can really move mountains, whether that's with workout programs, connecting with clients. It's definitely a disproportionate advantage that those types of people have. However, that can become a huge weakness. And as business, as the world changes, as people's life changes, I think it's so important to figure out how you can make sure from an early day how you can sort of offset that, that what would seem as though almost it's a bit of a gift, but that could turn into your sort of Achilles heel. And some of that, I can see what you said. You used the word ego a few times as well. And I think a lot of that can play into it, because it's like, hey, this wouldn't be what it is without me. I'm great. I've done this. And I can see there's a certain amount of pride that comes with that. But I think as early as possible to recognize, you probably are the secret sauce, but the sooner that you can build a system and build a team to be able to duplicate that, that really should be what you as an owner should consider as your legacy, which is, how do I share everything that made me successful with other people? So yeah, that's my takeaway. Mo, what do you take away from the conversation?
Well, I think it is that, and I would also add that when you have that key man feature, it's actually a liability. It's not a feature, because not only can you not scale, but as you look to exit the business, it's going to really hurt your valuations. As companies try to come in, what they're really looking for are the things that JJ talked about, which is systems and key leadership in place. And as much as it feels good to be the most important person in the room and it's your baby because it's your brand, it's also a liability. So how do you kind of put the systems in place will be critical. Well, JJ, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. I can't believe it's taken us this long to get you on, but really appreciate you coming on. Where can people find you?
You can visit my website, jjcreegan.com, or I'm very active on Instagram and LinkedIn, sharing my tips and observation on the industry, as well as, recent headline and news that I think every owner and operator should be aware of. So seek me out there.
That's excellent. And look, we do a monthly Lifts brief that we just started in January. I think we're on episode 3 or 4 right now. So if you want to write a little piece, we'd love to include it in our next newsletter. And for those of you that are not subscribed, please go ahead, and we have a website up. We launched it earlier this year called liftspodcast.com. You could subscribe to the brief. It is free. It also helps you stay in touch with us and where we are going to show up next. We're working on some special things for this year, including some live events as well with a few partners. Thank you so much for joining, and do not forget to like and subscribe.